Madam Chair.
Yes, I call this regular meeting of the Kissimmee Utility Authority to order and ask Brian if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I'll call on Grant and Jeff to explain some about this type of meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you and to the board members. Madam Chair, this meeting is being held virtually pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 20-1112, which the Governor waived by executive order the requirement that local agencies meet pursuant to a physical quorum present. That order was extended. Actually, the original order was order number 20-0-69, and that order was extended in order number 20-112. Just for your information, the governor is reopening most counties in this state to phase 2, and I anticipate it's very likely that the next meeting in July will be required to be held by a physical quorum, but we'll keep everyone up to date on that if that happens. And now I'll turn it back over to Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Grant. Just a couple of housekeeping notes for today's meeting. So far, we've had great sound checks, so we're hoping everything will continue to go smoothly. Please use the raise hand feature or try to visually indicate if you need to interject. That is a request from our chair that we keep everything orderly. And also to reduce background noise. If you're not speaking at the moment, please remember to mute yourself. It helps a lot with the overall audio quality for everybody else who is listening. For members of the public who are watching from YouTube or KUA.com, you can contact us via the form on the website where you're watching the video. To send any questions in for the board, you can find that form right there on the meeting minutes page for today's meeting at KUA.com. If you're presenting remotely, and we have several of those today, I will be advancing your slides at the time when you're called. Please just be ready audio-wise and have yourself on unmute when you're ready to present. You'll see your slides on the screen, and then I'll advance them for you as you indicate. And if you experience any audio or visual difficulty, the best thing to do is just to disconnect and reestablish a new connection. We'll be watching for you if you're waiting in the waiting area to bring you back in if you lose your connection. That usually fixes 99% of the issues. And we think that'll probably be unnecessary today because everything seems to be going very well for once. But I don't want to jinx it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Well, actually, I think it comes back to me. And we're on item C, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion regarding the agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept.
And a second?
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 And any opposed by like sign. And now we will turn the meeting over to Brian for the awards and presentations.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see those of you who I can see. I know you can't see me, but good to have you here with us, even if it is remotely. Madam Chair and members of the board, as you're aware, we had been holding a number of service awards and recognition over the past couple of months because we've been conducting these meetings via virtual, but today we're going to go ahead and recognize those folks that either had a service award for their years of service or employee of the month for the months of April, May, and June. If I could get the presentation up, we'll go ahead and get started. First employee that we want to recognize is Samuel GAULT. We know him as Nathan. He's a lineman in our operations department. We're recognizing him for 5 years of service. Nick Avelis is a apprentice lineman 2 in our operations department, and we're recognizing Nick for 5 years of service to KUA. Frank Ackerman, we know him as Lars. He also is a apprentice lineman 2 in our operations department, and we are also recognizing him for 5 years of service. Pamela Andrews is a customer service representative 2 in our customer service department. We're recognizing her for 15 years of service. Our next is our Employee of the Month for June, Marcos Diaz. Marcos is a customer service specialist in our customer service department. He has been with the organization for 7 years, and his supervisor had this to say about him. Late last year, Marcos was able to provide critical assistance to a member within our community. Marcos was driving when he noticed that a Toyota Tundra truck bed was on fire. The driver pulled over and Marcos was able to use his company vehicle fire extinguisher to put the fire out. He exercised immediate action, determination, and bravery to make sure no one got hurt. Thank you, Marcos, for your unconditional response and valor in that situation. Outstanding. Thank you, Marcos. For May, Leslie Gowdy. She is a supervisor of utility billing and customer service in our customer service department. We're recognizing her for 20 years of service. Felix Escobar, manager of distribution engineering in our operations department. We're recognizing Felix for 30 years of service to the organization and community. Thank you, Felix. Our Employee of the Month for May 2020 was Jim Harnoy. He's our supervisor of SCADA and communications within our operations department. He's been with the organization for 18 years, and his supervisor had this to say about him. Jim was has been instrumental in the successful development of KUA's AMI system. Prior to the actual meters being deployed in the field, Jim was critical to ensuring that the network infrastructure required to support the operations were properly installed. Jim's attitude and drive for operational excellence has delivered a product that KUA and its customers can expect to receive benefits for years to come. Thank you, Jim. And then we only had one service award in April, and that was our Employee of the Month, Mr. Bill Fisher. He's an engineering technician 2 in our operations department and has been with the organization for over 29 years. One of Bill's coworkers had this to say about him. Bill is very committed and loyal to the community of Kissimmee. Bill comes with remarkable enthusiasm and energy every day in order to make our company successful. Bill goes out of his way to submit great ideas to move forward within the division. He has been a generous mentor, and everyone looks to him for counseling and advice. His knowledge about the history of our community and the KUA electric system will be missed when he retires later this year. Nonetheless, he's made himself available to continue serving and being a good ambassador for KUA. I've had the opportunity in my time here to work with Bill in my former capacity, and I will tell you, we will miss him very much when he leaves later this year. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
And this is where virtual meetings just don't seem quite right. Somehow not shaking hands with people and giving them at least a token reward for their service. It just doesn't seem right, but we can give them a hand.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, okay, let's.
Everybody on their anniversaries and also good standings.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And we'll move on to hear the audience. Do we have anything from anybody in the audience? Any questions or anything?
Madam Chair, no.
Okay. Then item F, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Move one to approve.
And a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed by like sign? There is no public hearing. Informational presentations.
Yes, Madam Chair. We have 3 informational presentations for you this afternoon. The first 2 presentations are from community organizations that have benefited from sponsorship funding authorized by the board through KUA sponsorship program. Representatives from each organization is on the line to share with you how those funds have benefited our community. First, we will have Larry Berry, the general manager for the Kissimmee Valley Livestock Show and Fair, who will be followed by Brandon Arrington, executive director of Osceola Arts. Mr. Berry, can you hear us, and are you still on the line?
I can. I'm on the line. And Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you very much for allowing us to provide a recap of the 2020 Osceola County Fair and tell you a little bit about how your partnership dollars went towards our fair for this year. You may advance the slide, please. First of all, on behalf of the Kissimmee Valley Livestock Show and Osceola County Fair and the KVLS team, we want to thank you for being a partner and a sponsor of the 2020 Osceola County Fair. We got very lucky this year. We were able to have our fair, even though at the time of our fair, COVID-19 was already in the news. To date, 149 fairs and festivals throughout the country have been canceled, including the latest one that was announced this week, which is the Indiana State Fair. So we got very lucky and very fortunate to be able to still get our fair in. A little bit about information about our attendance and a recap of how the fair went. We did have about a 6% increase in attendance this year from 2019. We had a little bit of weather conditions towards the end of the week that dampened spirits and attendance just a little bit, but overall it was very good. We had a lot of firsts for the fair, including our fireworks, our tribute to military veterans and first responders, which was a big event. And of course, we had a great lineup of entertainment also this year at the fair. You can advance the slide, please. A little bit of breakdown about as far as how some of the funds from partners and sponsors are utilized, including our advertising, marketing, and mediums. This shows you the dollars that were spent for our marketing this year. We did have a lot of great successes there, including Channel 9, which indicated they're on the social takeover they had this year. They reported one of the highest results ever they had in a single day, which was 418,000 impressions. Those impressions meant that your logo was seen on all that advertising. Which is a great way of being able to get your organization out into the public eye. We had radio, we had outdoor advertising, we had print, we had digital, we had TV, and KUA was included in all of those formats. You may advance the slide, please. So this shows you a little bit about the advertising that was utilized and done, including your banners that are up on the fair grounds, the advertising on our buses, which is the one in the center that you see, our brochure that was done, our flyers, our posters that were put out everywhere where we were able to include the KUA logo included into that. Another thing that you will be able to see in our advertising too, for our advertising and marketing, is that the marketing dollars that are spent includes a banner that is included in our arena. It is there 12 months out of the year and is there for the guests that come into our arena for various functions and activities at Kissimmee Valley Livestock Pavilion. You can advance the slide, please. So a little bit about the student days, which are sponsored by Kissimmee Utility Authority. We had Thursday night and Friday night, which are the two student days that we had. A total number of 4,333 total students that attended, which is about 6% of the total guests at the fair. 2019, we had 4,416, so it was very comparable to the number that we had from the previous year. The ticket value for that, for allowing the students in free, for that was $21,665, and your contribution worked toward allowing the students to be able to get into the fair for free. And you see part of the advertising that was done on the right-hand side of your screen there for the banners that went out and the brochures that went out regarding student days. You can advance the next slide, please. So a few of the highlights that we had a rock scavenger hunt this year, which was something new, and that featured our partners and sponsors, including KUA. We actually had 4-H hand paint some rocks. Those rocks were numbered. They were put out at our various sponsor locations, along with some cute little ways for them, the general public, to be able to find those rocks, and they could redeem those rocks for tickets to the fair. We had a new express line for the fair in 2020, and there were no lines longer than 10 minutes reported, which is a first that I think this fair has ever had. The fireworks were a huge hit. We had expanded outdoor and main stage entertainment, and of course, our expanded advertising and social electronic media, which was this year was the highest that it's ever been. And of course, we had our Miss Osceola pageant was held on the first weekend. It normally is held on the second. That was a change that we made, and actually is a change that we're going to continue with, which worked out very well for both the pageant and for us. Miss Osceola this next year, by the way, is going to continue her reign due to the cancellation of the Miss Florida and Miss America pageants. She will continue to be Miss Osceola for another year. Advance the slide, please. Look about next year, 2021, our new theme is Strengthen Youth and Strong in Heritage. This fair has come a long way from this picture on the left-hand side from the original fair grounds that they had here on the property off of 192. And I can tell you that it has really gone through a significant change, and of course with the facilities that we have here. We are 256 days out from the next fair, which will be held February 12th through 21st. You can advance the slide, please. So new ideas that we're looking at for the fair for next year for our 77th Osceola County Fair. We are looking to repeat the fireworks and expanding that possibly even another night. We had 2 nights this last year. We're looking at doing a high school battle of the bands, which is all part of our Strengthen Youth part of our slogan for next year. And that would include all 8 Osceola high schools in Osceola County. Something new and different that we're looking at doing, and we think will be great for showcasing those talents that our youth have with the local high schools. We're looking also into adding a virtual animal show and auction as well, in addition to the physical auction. That has happened as a result of what's happened with the COVID crisis and some fairs not having their fairs, but able to hold their auctions and doing those virtually, which has been a huge success. Reviewing the feasibility of possibly doing some season passes for part of our ticket sales, which would be new and different. Doing more community related events, including those associated with heritage and Osceola County. In fact, we have reached out to the History Museum here, and they have provided us some documentation information, which we'll be highlighting as we are progressing it closer to the fair. One of the ideas that we came up with possibly is looking at doing KUA Olympics. We understand this was done some years back, and it's something that we would entertain and love to talk to Kissimmee Utility Authority about. And of course, on opening day, we want to open up for seniors early, which would mean that they're able to come in the fair 2 hours prior to the normal opening. We would have concessionaires open. During that time, it would be specifically for seniors as a tribute to seniors, which is a little different from what they've done before. They've had early openings an hour early, but we were looking to do that for a 2-hour period and looking at that. You could advance the next slide, please. And I guess last but not least, again, thank you. We look forward to partnering with you in the coming year for 2021. We have, as I said, some new and innovative things we're looking at doing for our fair for this year. Some things in order to showcase both KUA and especially our youth in Osceola County and those things that we do. We paid out a significant amount in premiums this year. I think it was about $80,000, about $80,000 in premiums to the youth this year at the fair. And part of your sponsorship dollars goes towards that as well. So again, thank you very much on behalf of Osceola County Fair and the Kissimmee Valley Livestock Show. We greatly appreciate your partnership.
And thank you, Larry. Any questions?
No.
Okay, move on to Osceola Arts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I don't have a great presentation for y'all to look at, so you just get to stare at my ugly mug for a couple minutes. I would love to follow up on what Larry said about getting lucky. I would tell you, with your support and everyone else from the community, Osceola Arts up until March was headed towards the best year in our 59-year history. And since March, we have unfortunately have our doors shuttered. So that means we've had to cancel classes, art workshops, several different shows, concert events, and have even had to push our camps back from June to look at starting in July. So we, like a lot of businesses out there, are really looking at retooling, trying to understand what comes next as far as being able to have people in our theater, having people look at art exhibits, and a lot of other things. But fortunately, we're taking this time while we're shut down to do some house cleaning, redoing some of our bathrooms, our dressing facilities, trying to make sure our facility is as clean as can be when we finally get folks back in here in July. Just some of the things that I want to tell you, with your help and support, once again, our theater season was at the highest levels we've ever seen. And obviously KUA is represented on the back of every single program we give every attendee to our theaters. This year, you all stepped up and helped out our children's theater company as well, which we've seen tremendous growth in. And also there again, your sponsorship is shown on the back of the programs for all of our kids' theater as well. And one of the reasons your contribution and other contributions from our community are so important is because we try and provide our program at a lot lower cost than any other facility in Central Florida, because we feel it's very important that our working class community here in Osceola County has the advantages and the opportunity to take in the arts that communities that might have a higher wealth generation than we do have that same opportunity. Our classes and our camps and our children's theater program continually are at half the price of what you might come across in Orange or Seminole or Brevard counties. And we could not do that without the sponsorship and the help of KUA, Disney, and all of our other community partners, and Experience Kissimmee as well. One of the other opportunities that you guys stepped forward to help sponsor is our lip sync battle. This is our annual fundraiser. And if you haven't had a chance to come see it, I highly recommend you get a seat and come out and join us. We put a bunch of elected officials on the stage and we have them make fools of themselves. What better way to raise funds for the arts? I will have to tell you though, there again, that usually is in August. And unfortunately, we
Brian,
had now to
You and
postpone
I
it
have to do that.
to October. So we're actually having to push that opportunity out a little bit further
Oh.
because we didn't feel at this time elected officials would really be willing to get on stage to perform, and corporations weren't really going to be in the giving posture, if you will, in the coming months, and rightfully so. So we've been able to push that out a little bit as well. As I told you before, we're trying to come back online in July with our camps at about a third of the capacity that we normally do them. The same thing, our production of Once on This Island, we've had to postpone and is now also going to be opening in July as well. So we're looking at phase 2 instructions and trying to figure out how you're at 50% capacity when everyone has to be 6 feet apart. Those two things don't match. So we're trying to get through the math and understand what's the safest and best way to operate when that happens. And I will tell you, and I know I've said it slightly, but if it wasn't for the community support we have here in Osceola County, in this 4 months that we've been shuttered, we would not be able to keep our doors open. And unfortunately, we would lose the only artistic opportunity we have in all of Osceola County. So we really appreciate all the support you all have been able to provide in the past years, and obviously in hopefully our relationship moving forward as well. I will just tap on one of the highlights that isn't affected by COVID-19, and that's our mural project in downtown Kissimmee. If you've had a chance to go in downtown Kissimmee, over the last 2 years, Osceola Arts has partnered with the city of Kissimmee and created 8 different murals to try and create a placemaking opportunity in downtown Kissimmee. We have a very young, multicultural, vibrant population, and we want to make sure that our neighborhoods and our community kind of reflect that. So if you get a chance, I highly encourage you to take a drive around downtown Kissimmee and see some of the amazing artwork that's done. It's been a blessing for tourism in the area, but also just to expose people to art on a daily basis in their commute. So really, really wanted to highlight that as well. And like I said, we're trying to get back online so we can make sure art exhibits are open so people are able to see visual arts. We want to make sure our kids can get to camp and be in a safe and still learn theater and learn visual art techniques as well. And the same thing for our theater goers. We know people are itching to get back to live entertainment. We just want to make sure we can provide it in the safest possibility that we can, because we, as I always tell my staff, the last thing we ever want to do is become a hot spot in our community. So we've really taken that seriously moving forward. So I will tell you, we were headed towards the best year our budget had ever seen. And now we probably have taken a jump back by about 3 years in where we'll end up this year. So it's a struggle, but we obviously are not alone. restaurants and other facilities that care about attendance, our hotels. We're all seeing this issue here in our community, but we're all trying to work together to get us back on track and get our community moving forward as well. I will stop talking. If you all have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And also, I forgot to add, we're glad to be a member and provide tickets once again to your employees of the month. It's something we've done for years and years and years, and we like doing it because it's a great way to reward your employees, but it's also a great way to expose people to theater and arts that may not necessarily get that exposure on a regular basis. So thank you guys for your time. Thank you for your support. And if you don't have any questions, I hope I see you guys on October 9th at the lip sync battle at Gaylord Palms.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we've got, first of all, thank Mr. Berry and Commissioner Arrington for coming to share that information with us. You will probably see me, Commissioner Arrington, October 9th, if it's there. I've got one board member here in the boardroom looking at me, wanting to know if I'm going to participate, but I'll tell you, I've got 2 left feet, so.
Hey, listen, we hire professional choreographers. Everyone looks good. So if the KUA board wanted to put together maybe a group or a medley, we'd
Yes,
love that.
yes, we want to do that.
I'd love
And
to
the
have you guys.
funniest, the better.
I'll be following back up. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Madam-
Brian. Mhm.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the next presentation relates to KUA's return to the workplace plan. As you all know, we've been responding to the impacts associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, especially as it relates to our operations and our ability to serve our customers and ensure the continuity of reliable electric service. As I mentioned to you each individually, we assembled a task force to develop KUA's return to workplace plan that also included input and feedback from our employee organization committee. And here to tell you a little bit more about that plan is Susan Postons, Vice President of Customer Service, who led that task force team.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I look forward to hopefully seeing you all next month. So as Brian mentioned, we did have a task force that was assembled to make our plan for returning to the workplace. If you could go to the next slide, please. Similar to everyone else, we did appreciate the fact that it's going to need to be in phases as things progress, as we continue to learn more. But KUA's plan is going to move at its own pace. And even some of the individual items may move at a different pace as we continue to learn more. Each topic that we consider recognizes that the guidelines are changing, the symptoms are changing, the asymptomatic information is changing. And as first responders and providing such an essential service, we need to be sure that we're taking extra care to protect our skilled workforce. So next slide, please. So we looked at, go ahead and continue, please. We looked at 29 different things that we thought we needed to consider. I've combined some of them that were similar to, for the sake of this presentation. But we did have our HR department pull together some required training for all of our employees as they either return to the workplace or actually even if they've been in the workplace. These were focused on the top 3 protective measures that were recommended by the CDC, which includes personal hygiene, physical distancing, and frequent disinfection of common surfaces. So that training was completed by all employees as of May 27th. We also decided as a group that we should establish a criteria that we would use to actually send employees home. And what we determined was that similar or in compliance with the CDC, a temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, the employee would be sent home. Now, there are a lot of other symptoms that we're all aware of, and we do want to keep an eye on those, but the temperature would be the criteria. We do have employees that are considered vulnerable individuals, or they have family members that are vulnerable. And this was defined by the CDC as elderly people or people with underlying health conditions. So our vulnerable individuals are being put in a category by themselves, and they are sheltering in place or working from home when possible until we get to KUA's phase 3. And then on a case-by-case basis, we will be bringing them back into the workplace. Fortunately, we've been able to have the vulnerable individuals that have notified us, they've all been able to work from home. So it's worked out very well so far. Employees that are returning after an illness or possible exposure to someone with COVID-19, and employees that are returning from non-essential travel, such as vacations, are treated the same. They must report that information to their supervisor. They must self-quarantine, either working from home or using their accrued leave for 14 days. Or they can provide us negative test results. They can go out and get a COVID-19 test and bring the negative results back to the office place, and they can return to the workplace. So those two are the same. Business travel at this time is not allowed. We believe it will be available in KUA's phase 3, but it's only essential travel, and it has to be approved by the vice president, and they have to follow all CDC guidelines. So next slide, please. Okay, as you know, we've done a lot of things to protect our workforce. We have a considerable amount of our employees working from home. We have some departments that have set up shifts where you're in the office some days and not in the office other days so that social distancing can be maintained. Our crews have separate reporting locations, so they're not ever all together in the same place in case one crew gets sick. We also have, wherever there's a need for more than one person in a KUA vehicle, it's always the same 2 people. We don't let them keep shifting around. So all of these things were done, again, just trying to protect our workforce. As we move to phase 3, the goal ultimately is everyone that worked in the office is to get them back into the office following all the CDC guidelines. In phase 3, the shifts will end and everyone will report back to the office. However, we're going to continue the separate reporting locations. We just find that to be a good practice. And we're also going to continue limiting the people that can be in a vehicle together. It has not had any negative impact on our operations at all, and we just think it's a good practice. Opening the lobby to the public, we are planning to open the lobby on June 8th, which is Monday. This required a lot of planning and preparation and execution. The CDC guidelines are posted throughout. They will be posted on the monitors, reminding customers those guidelines. There will be floor markings for social distancing, like the labels that you've seen in other locations telling you how far apart to stand. The employees will all be behind barriers. There will be barriers between the employees and the public. And we also have, the employees are required to continuously disinfect their workspace throughout their shift. We are hiring a porter that will be there from 10 o'clock until 2 o'clock, wiping down and disinfecting surfaces to protect our customers and our employees. And we've split up our customer service lobby representatives into 2 teams. So they will be in the office 1 week and out of the office 1 week in case one member happens to get sick. Then we have a backup team that can continue to work while the others are quarantined, and we can continue serving our customers. The restrooms are open, or they will be open. The water fountain, however, has been disconnected, the drinking fountains. So vendors and contractors and the employees that they come and meet with will need to follow all the CDC guidelines. You can see we're going to be doing temperature checks for vendors, customers, and all employees entering the building. So in all of the buildings, there is a designated location for employees to enter. First time they report into the building that day, they will take their temperature and they will notify their supervisor that they are well and ready to work that day. The customers, we will have a station set up as you enter the front door where temperatures will be checked. We are in the process of hiring a care ambassador. And that care ambassador will be taking the temperatures of customers and contractors and vendors if they happen to come in that way, but most of them come in escorted through a different entrance. If their temperature is 100.4 or above, they will be handed a card telling them that we definitely want to help them and we can help them remotely. So please call us, go online with all the information on how to reach us so that we can continue taking care of them. Let's see. Face coverings will be required for vendors, customers, and employees in all the common areas. And we will have face coverings for customers that don't have one. But obviously we don't have enough for everyone. And employee personal hygiene. Employees are required to clean their hands as soon as they enter the building. The plan is that they don't go through the whole office building before they wash their hands. So next slide, please. Excuse me. Break rooms and common areas. Hang on one second, please. The employee numbers are being limited in the break rooms to allow for social distancing. The refrigerators are going to be emptied of all personal items each night. Cleaning supplies will be available in all of these break rooms and common areas for the employees to use. And our cleaning crew does a deep sanitation nightly. And we have posted additional signage in these areas for the employees. Excuse me. In the gym, the number of employees is limited to allow for social distancing. The employees must schedule an appointment to work out and they are required to clean all surfaces upon completion. In the elevator, it will be one occupant at a time until we reach phase 3, and the employees are required to clean their hands upon exit. We have tried to establish sanitation devices right outside of each elevator on the floor. I know we have one on the first floor, but employees have all been provided a small personal bottle of sanitation that they can take with them if need be. Cleaning, let's see, cleaning and disinfecting. I mentioned that employees are doing it throughout the day. The porter will be wiping down handles and countertops and everything where the customers visit. And there will be a deep cleaning every night. Protective barriers and or social distancing for work areas. You'll see on the outside, since you haven't been to the building for a while, on the outside of the windows where the cashiers and customer service reps, where the customers stand, we have set up barriers between each window. So the customers have a barrier between them and the customer at the next window to help keep them safe. We have also, what you're looking at here, set up plexiglass barriers between the workstations of each of the cashiers and customer service reps so that they have a barrier between each of them as well. Thanks to our central services and facilities folks. They've been working very hard and taking care of a lot of this for us. The other part of this was each department needed to look at every office space in their department and make sure that there was the ability for employees to be 6 feet apart. You know, we have some rooms where there's multiple employees in one room, and we may have to move a couple of them out in order to allow for the 6 feet between each employee. Energy audits for home and business, no field visits until phase 3. And at that point in time, we will probably do them following all CDC guidelines. So next slide, please. Okay, meetings, we want to do virtual when possible. We are following the CDC guidelines. So phase one, if you absolutely had to have a meeting and if you could stay, you had to stay 6 feet apart, it would be less than 10 people. Phase two will be less than 50 people. And again, we're trying virtual whenever possible. The training, same thing. However, the training is going to be essential training only, which is defined as someone who could, it would degrade our service to our customers. It could cause organizational confusion if the employee didn't have the training, or they could lose some required licensing or certification that they need. That's the only training that would be approved. Board meetings, as you know, it depends on the governor. So we'll just follow that. We did also look at opening the meeting rooms. We have 2 community organizations. We looked at Meridia. We looked at Cane Island Tours. None of those are open at this time. And in phase 3, it still is to be determined. So next slide. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sue, you covered a lot of area, and it looks good. I know this is a living document, and it could change tomorrow, but so far it looks good. For what a good presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't think of anything y'all have left out.
Well, that's good to hear.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Then we'll move on to old business.
Okay, Madam Chair. Earlier this year, the board began a review of the current process that's used to evaluate the performance of the president and general manager. At that time, I directed the Vice President of Human Resources to work directly with the board, and more specifically the chair, to address the concerns with the existing process and implement any additional desired components. Prior to us entering into this COVID-19 pandemic, the board held a couple of workshops with Evergreen Solutions to develop a new process that took into account some industry best practices. Staff has been working with the consultant and the chair to consolidate the feedback provided by the board during those sessions into a package, along with the required policy directive replacement for your consideration. And here to talk about that a little bit more is Cindy Herrera, our Vice President of Human Resources.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I put together just a brief presentation and overview, just to kind of add on to what Brian stated already. You know, we started this journey to develop a performance evaluation methodology that incorporates the feedback from the board, the best practices, and allow for administrative capabilities. So we started this, if you can, time has flown by, but we started this working with conjunction with Dr. Ling. We've had some workshops earlier this year, February, March. During that time, we collected feedback from the board. Dr. Ling actually drafted a draft version of a performance evaluation. And at our board meeting in March, the Directive 13-002 was suspended temporarily based off of what we ended up would determine what the outcome was on this review. Since then, myself and Dr. Ling have worked with Chair Kathleen Thacker, and we put together a final version. So that is what the board did receive in their packet. So a notebook is what we identified that as. And in this performance review notebook, it houses the cover letter, state of KUA that Brian would be putting together, the strategic plan, identifying those being met or not, core competencies assessments, There was two, would be self, which would be Brian, and the board of directors. SPA results would be included, additional goals as well, and additional information sheet with a bonus review form. That was a lot, and there was a lot in there, but to help identify what that would actually physically look like, working document, this notebook. So with that, I'm just kind of put together just a summary of the other components. So we have the review that we've put together, and then also looking at the directive that needs to be a new directive that would need to be included. So there's a summary of the old directive on there, 13-02. Again, this is just a summary of that because it's pretty long, which is to have the review conducted annually, evaluations compiled and discussed at an open meeting. And the compensation was based on compiling the calculations and ratings and actual adjustments to be decided by the board. Again, this is just a summary. There was a lot that went into a lot of spreadsheets and such, as you recall. This new directive that was provided for you was a 20-01. And in this, again, President, General Manager, CEO's review conducted annually. The review would be in a workbook format. The board is to vote on any additional goals or remove existing, and this would be done annually, and compensation would be in line with the approved fiscal year market level adjustment unless the board decides otherwise. Again, a summary of the two directives that was all included in the packet for you all. So with that, the recommendation would be to approve the newly developed performance management review process and adopt the new board policy directive 20-01.
Any questions or comments or?
So that whole policy was what you just went over, or there's more to it? That was the whole policy?
That was a summary of it. It's
Oh, okay.
it's in
That
the
was
agenda and it's about a page long, but that was a summary of what it says.
I can,
No, that's Chad. So you were involved in the final version of this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And
By phone, but definitely.
okay. Yeah, I understand.
I think we're trying to make it where the board can gain a lot of information by the materials that are given to us from the SPA to the state of KUA to whatever. So we have a good packet of information to put together with our knowledge of what our CEO is doing to decide, do we want to renew the contract or don't we? And
Right.
it's more of a yes, no. And then if there were some things we wanted to say, we can add goals or we can recommend a bonus or whatever. But we've got a lot of materials to help us put together the evaluation.
Well, it appears to be a vast improvement from what we did in the past. So with that in mind, so it's always a living document, and who knows, maybe a year or two down the road, we might have to change it again or so forth. But yeah, okay. I understand. So if you need a motion, I'll make a motion to approve the this policy directive.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just real quick, it's a technicality, but when you get the document to sign where it says attest, that's going to be over Secretary Urbina's signature, not over the President and General Manager's. I apologize for not catching that earlier.
I'm sure that I'll have a little colored sticky note showing me where.
Yeah, you will. You will.
Otherwise, I sometimes wouldn't know anyhow.
And I'll be signing that.
That's right. I apologize, Secretary Ortega. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so all in favor?
All right.
Say
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Nope.
Hearing none, we'll move on to no new business, staff reports. The quarterly
Yes.
financial report.
Yes, Madam Chair. We've got one staff report today. Kevin Crawford, Vice President, Finance and Administration, is going to provide us with an update on how we're doing financially through the second quarter of the fiscal year.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here today to share with you the financial results through March 31st, or for the period into March 31st, which is the end of the second quarter of fiscal year 2020. And as we move into this, the first slide that we see here is a bit of encouraging news. We see that we're about 2.8% ahead actual over budget in terms of megawatt hour sales from 20 budget to 20 actual. And we are just slightly behind, just a smidge, about 0.5% behind where we were last year at this time for our sales results last year. So we are ahead of budget and moving positively forward, we think, in terms of megawatt hour sales for this fiscal year. More good news is that we have been able to maintain excellent financial strength by achieving a positive net income and meeting all the fiscal policies set forth by the KOA board, as you have described here on this slide. And there is your 15.6 net income that we show there for positive net income. Additionally, improving customer service by achieving a life-to-date competitive ranking of bottom 1/3. We're at 21.6. I have a goal of 33% for being in the bottom 1/3 of 1,000 kWh residential rate rankings in the state of Florida that's compared or compiled by FMEA. And this slide shows you how we have used rate stabilization year to date. We had expected this year to, at this point, to have deposited $3.3 million into the rate stabilization. We've actually withdrawn 3.9 for a $7.2 million variance. And the biggest reason for that is we've utilized that for capital funds. Up and through March, we didn't use anything for the bottom 1/3 metric. So the majority of that difference that you see there was utilized for capital purposes. Now, obviously, that'll change the second half of the year. And as you know, our busiest months are coming up. So we typically replenish rate stabilization during that time period. So that will, we expect, even itself out. But that majority of that rate stabilization that you see, the variance, was spent on our two biggest capital projects that are going on right now. And mostly those are the line extensions that are generally ongoing throughout the year, and on the AMI, which is really revved up and is just about, I think, in its maximum here. I believe we expect to have that done in very short order. And so we are ramping that project up and utilizing capital funds for that purpose. Moving into the specific financials, the operating revenue, we are at metered sales revenue is, like I described earlier, it correlates with what you saw in KWH sales. We're about $3 million ahead in that regard. Bad debt, we'd expected to have write-offs of $42 million. We're at 158 to the positive. So a $200,000 value there as we've collected some of that outstanding debt. And so that's in the positive because we have really strong collection, really good collection efforts. We have a cost of power adjustment here, a variance of about $4.4 million. And the reason that you see that is related to the fact that fuel expenses are lower than what we anticipated them to be. You know, there's not a great deal of demand right now for natural gas. Storage is high. And as you know, as the fuel expenses go down, then our COPA goes up, it becomes larger. The negative number becomes bigger, I guess we should say, because that's a credit to customers. So that 4.4 million is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's returning the difference between actual fuel cost and what was collected from customers back to the customers. And so that's the difference that you see there. And the rate stabilization transfer, I previously mentioned to you on another slide, the variance there and why there is a variance related to capital project expenditures. And so we see operating revenues with about a $6 million variance there, again, largely related to the utilization of the rate stabilization fund. Moving through the second piece of the fuel and purchase power, the top half of the income. I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
Kathleen, I have a
Yes.
question.
Uh-huh.
Sorry for interruption.
No, ma'am.
But debt, you mentioned that there was a heavy collection. Was that from previous years or is that from now?
It's combined. Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, to the question of what does that collections number represent? It's previous years and current years. I think we turn those over to collections I believe it's 3 to 6 months after we try to collect them. And so we send those to collections, and some of those are old. I think, I want to say, and Susan can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe those are even years old. I think up to maybe 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7 years sometimes. So we continuously try to collect that until it's completely uncollectible for whatever legal reason, bankruptcy discharge or what have you. But yes, ma'am, some of those are fairly recent and some of those are quite old.
Very amazing that we're collecting so much now.
I think so too.
This is the first quarter, so it would have been January, February, and March. So we weren't into the unemployment time.
Second quarter.
Second
This is
quarter,
the
Madam
second-
Chair. Yes, second quarter, Madam
I
Chair.
mean-
Yes.
But her point is still valid.
Yeah, still a good point. That's correct. We had not entered into the current economic environment that we were in.
Correct.
Okay,
So moving into the fuel and purchase power portion, the demand charges, again, all of these compile to or accumulate to give you the total fuel and purchase power cost. Again, demand charges less than we budgeted, energy charges less than we had budgeted by 4.6 million. That gives you fuel and purchase power of about 5 million, and therefore you saw the COPA come pretty close to that at about 4.5 million. To return that back to customers because of the variance, their positive variance related to fuel and purchase power expense. And when you combine those two, you get the revenues minus the fuel and purchase power of a variance of about 11.7 million or year-to-date actual of 45 million compared to the budget of 33. Moving into the departmental O&Ms, really not a story to tell here. No notable variances. Every department is coming in O&M under or at budget. So really nothing of note here, moving along as steady as we can. And that gives us a positive variance there of about 12.8 million for a net income of $27.4 million of net operating revenue. And then we deduct our other operating expenses, the final component of the income statement. Again, no material variances, nothing of note here to point out. All of these are in alignment with where we expect them to be, pretty close there too. And that gives us a positive net income that we showed you on the previous slide of 15.6 million and the positive variance to budget of 13.2, again, largely related to using the rate stabilization. Investment portfolio, this gives you an idea where we've invested. Not a lot of change here, $120 million in our total investment portfolio. The biggest piece of that is the 47.1 at the State Board of Administration, which is a lot of short-term securities, which is what we keep ours invested in because we like to maintain that liquidity requirement. Here's an interesting story. You'll see this. I don't think this will surprise anyone, but we were talking, Madam Chair, you talked about the economics. January to March, you'll see the dip in the return of our metric, the KOA effective return across the board, even at the SBA. You'll recall that about January, February, February was when the news cycle started to give us information about COVID. And I think a lot of the investors got a little scared. And so what they did, this is a flight to quality, and ended up moving a lot of money out of the stock market and bonds and into U.S. Treasuries. And at one point during the investment horizon of January to March, there was even a negative rate of return on U.S. Treasuries because they didn't know what was going to happen. And so they were flocking to Treasuries. And because the demand was so high for U.S. Treasury debt, that drove the yields down. And so you saw in some cases there was such a glut and a requirement and demand that people were paying a premium just to have those bonds, or excuse me, to have those U.S. Treasury securities. So that gives you an idea about why we saw the downturn now. And again, in the March, the Fed reduced the Fed funds rate even further to stimulate the economy and provide liquidity. And so we continue to see those yields go down. Hopefully they'll come back up. And that's all I have, Madam Chair, related to the second quarter financial presentation.
Thank you very much. And I bet you get to stay on for the next.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, he does, Madam Chair. Kevin, don't go too far. Back at the April board meeting, staff provided the board with the preliminary staffing and capital program budget for fiscal year 2021 and projections for fiscal years 22 through 25. The FY21 capital budget recommendation is approximately 23.8 million after contributed capital to support projects aimed at expanding and maintaining KUA's existing electric infrastructure. This afternoon, staff will be presenting you with the recommended O&M portion of the budget, including capital expenditure changes since that preliminary budget meeting. This would bring the total recommended FY21 budget to approximately 229 million, with the bulk of that due to the fuel and purchase power requirements. The FY21 budget also forecasts increases in customer growth by over 4% and energy sales by 1.4% over the current fiscal year. Now, obviously, these projections can vary depending on weather patterns and any long-term impacts associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. However, recent electric sales are pointing to being on target for the current fiscal year as we continue to see businesses reopen. You may also recall from the preliminary budget meeting that staff deferred its recommendation for any market level adjustment for the workforce at that time because we were so early on in the situation and had little information. So this budget document that y'all received does not reflect any MLA consideration in the numbers. However, now that staffs have the opportunity to analyze some of the impacts to the electric sales, staff will be bringing forth a recommendation for the MLA, which if the board approves, will need to be incorporated into the budget document and resolution next month. But Kevin can tell us a little bit more about all of that. And I believe Cindy's going to present as well. So Kevin.
Thank you, Brian. Madam Chair, as Brian mentioned, I'm going to share with you the staff's recommended budget for fiscal year 21. And as we prepare this budget, before we get into any of the details, we like to be reminded of the things that we keep in mind while we look at the budget process. And we look at our core purpose KUA has in the community, and that's to enrich the quality of life for our customers and our community. Our vision statement, which is to be the right utility providing the right services at the right time. And then our mission statement, which is to provide reliable and economic services to our customers and partnering with our community and our environment. All of those things inform this process, and we shared that with you last year. That informs the process from start to finish. And we don't look at those as just words. They're a creed for us. They're a value system for us when we look at the budget, always with an eye to our customers' needs and to being able to provide the service at the level that they've come to expect and deserve. So if you look at the budget meeting timeline, as Brian mentioned to you in his opening remarks, April 1st is when we talked about the budget for the first time. This is when we bring to you the staffing needs and we look at the capital budget plan and the overview of the budgeting process. In today's meeting, we're going to talk about the O&M expenses and then the revenues. So there's three legs to this. There's the capital piece, there's the O&M, and then in accordance with the O&M or concurrent with that, we talk about, our revenues and sales and how those shape up to cover those two items of expenditure, which are the capital and the O&M. So you've seen O&M, we're going to look at, you've seen capital, tonight we're going to look at O&M. And then July 1st, we'll come back together and hopefully if you are happy with what we present to you today, you will move to adopt that budget on July 1st with any modifications included in that. And then August 5th, we have a backup date in the event that there's a kink in the system or something goes sideways. We have a little extra time to meet the City of Kissimmee Charter. And then finally, October 1 is the beginning of the new budget and fiscal year that KUA recognizes. So I like to start out by getting you comfortable with the budget process and where we are. Before we dig into numbers, here are the things that are going to be reflected in the budget. First of all, this board current fiscal policy is achieved over the 5-year plan. While we only bring to you a 1-year plan at a time to approve, we look ahead 5 and 10-year multiples. And by Brian's direction, we include a 5-year outlook in the budget document. So that big document that you got on Friday includes a look ahead. So we don't just bring you one slice of the pie. We want you to see ahead. We want you to see what we're planning for 5 years. And we look at 10 years. And while 10 years out is a long way and those numbers get a little bit fuzzy as you look out, we feel good on the 5-year plan. And that's why we bring it to you. So when you look at that, we have been able to achieve the board current fiscal policy. And you recall what those are. That's the bottom 1/3 metric. That's being able to fund capital improvement fund and those things. And so, and they're all included in your budget document for your reference. So that's one thing we're able to do. Again, O&M reflects no staffing increases projected over the 5-year plan. There is no additional headcount, full-time equivalents at KUA for that 5-year plan. There are also no base rate increases projected over the 5-year plan. However, as we have done for quite a while, fuel and purchase power portion of the rate does fluctuate with costs, as we just talked about. It does in our quarterlies, and the rate stabilization is used again to achieve that bottom 1/3 metric. Our commercial paper debt will be retired over a 5-year plan. Last year, we said 6 years. Well, we're a year into that now, so there's only 5 years left to retire our commercial paper. It'll all be gone by 10/1/2025, and that's still on track to take place like we had shared with you last year. Also, no additional debt issuance is projected over the 5-year plan at this time. And as Brian did mention to you earlier, there is no market level adjustment in this budget document for fiscal year 21. And so anything, Cindy Herrera will be coming up, like Brian mentioned, and sharing with you what we feel is like a more timely piece of information as we move into the budget process, because we do start so early and there was emerging conditions and things were just developing. Now we are beginning to see things change and move forward. And so based on staff's recommendation, we'll have something for you later. And if you decide to implement that, then as Brian said, we will revise this budget document and the resolution accordingly. So you will get a new, I promise not bigger, but a new budget document that will contain the updated numbers that you speak of tonight. The COVID-19 impact. So let's kind of deal with the elephant in the room metaphorically. How do we prepare a budget when we're in the middle of a pandemic? And right now, with the preparation that KUA takes, are fairly extensive. And we don't just look at this as a one-time occurrence. We are looking at disasters constantly. We evaluate our financial strength. We look at ourselves operationally. We try to determine what is the best way to prepare our financials so that we can adequately deal with a situation for emerging conditions just like this. So a couple of things that we prepare that helps prepare is we have a strong deposit policy. This gives KUA some ability to cover outstanding debts by customers who decide to terminate their service and have an existing balance or an outstanding balance. So we can apply that to those outstanding payments. We have a strong reserves policy. The board, in its wisdom, has had the foresight to establish very good reserves at KUA. And I failed to mention on the previous slide that over the 5-year horizon, we do continue to keep a healthy reserve balance in all those funds. Additionally, we consistently review potential disaster scenarios. We have it every year. We have a DDD, which you're familiar with. We are constantly evaluating our financial models and stressing them. The rating agencies take a look. We have outside agencies. We have auditors looking at it. So we have a lot of eyes on those numbers to see that we're not just making them work and plugging them to fit. We take a really rational and circumspect approach to that. And additionally, our budget is conservative. And by that, I mean, when we look at revenues and we have to choose between a bigger number and a smaller number, we're going to go with a smaller number. And when we're looking at expenses and we have to go between a bigger number and a lower number, we're probably going to go with a little bit bigger, because we like to be able to provide that buffer in the event that things don't go as planned. And that gives you, the board, the peace of mind to know that we've prepared in that budget wiggle room, just like you do at home, because you don't know what catastrophes may come. You prepare yourself a little bit more. If your cable bill is $53, you may budget 55 or 60. You just never know. So we tend to err on the conservative side in most things that we do financially. So on your outlook, we anticipate meeting the FY 20 and 21 budgeted sales. We are seeing our numbers come in, and just today I saw the May sales results come in, and that means for the month of April's billing, we're seeing our May numbers to be at or about where we expected it to be. So on a year-to-date basis, and we'll bring these numbers back to you, right now we sit at about 4% above our budgeted sales. And we expect that as we go into the summer months, which are our highest demand and usage months, that we are going to see that trend continue. And we anticipate getting to our budgeted sales numbers for 20 and obviously for 21 as well. We are seeing numbers turn around for our classes of customers. For our residential customers, we shared with you last time we met, we saw the use per customer increasing, and a lot of that was due to weather. We're seeing our general service large demand customer use per customer increase. And the other two commercial classes are starting to reverse those trends as well. And so we're seeing a very positive move as the economy is opening up, and we continue to see that measured but optimistic approach to our financial numbers. We feel confident as we move into this budget process that the numbers that we prepared for 20 and 21 will hold true. And of course, no one can predict that, but that's how we are looking at the numbers currently, and that's what we're seeing those trends present to us.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any possibility that the new meters are providing us better numbers? Since we have a large percentage of implementation of the new meters,
When you say better numbers, what?
revenue numbers.
No, Madam Chair, they're the same numbers. It'd be the same numbers
As the old
with
meters?
as the existing meters that are currently in the field. What the new meters provide are additional functionality for both the utility and our customers.
And not better quality of reporting?
The quality and accuracy are very similar.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, as we move, if there's no questions, we'll move to the actual budget numbers. And this is just a graphical illustration of what you'll see sort of broken out numerically on the next page. Our metered sales, this is a netted number here. You'll see the total number on the next page. But this is our gross metered sales revenue of $241 million netted against our COPA of $62 million that we've budgeted for the $179 million. Our total budget on revenue side, including metered sales and all other sources, and the breakout of those we'll get into in just a minute, but it gives you the total operating revenues and other sources of $229 million. So we'll look at the operating revenues first and give you an idea of where those come from. As I shared with you just a second ago, the meter sales revenue we budgeted at we expect to be $241.9 million next year total gross sales. That's a $3.7 million increase over the current year, which is about 1.6. Again, a 1.6% increase in metered sales. And Brian mentioned that when he spoke to you in his opening remarks. Again, we feel like it's actually a conservative estimate, but it's a safe estimate and one that we can all live with and we're comfortable with, as that's developed through a pretty complex process of econometric modeling and analysis. Additionally, the rate stabilization fund transfer, we are using that money, as you recall, during the pandemic outbreak, we committed to using $8 million from May, June, July, and August in the current fiscal year. That's why you didn't see it in the March financials. You'll see it in the next quarters. But we will continue to utilize more money next year in order to reduce or to stay in the bottom 1/3 ranking. And we'll use an additional about $4 million. So that's about a 13.1 utilization of rate stabilization. And that ends up, between all the ins and the outs, we end up getting a transfer or deposit into rate stabilization of roughly $1 million. So it still gives us the flexibility to provide our customers the bottom 1/3 metric to alleviate some of their rate concerns and to make a deposit to our reserves. Additionally, when we look at, let's see, I think it might be, there we go. Lease revenue is $11.1 million, and this relates to the ARP project. This is the capacity credits that KUA receives as a result of being a participant in that project. And then total operating revenues of about $195 million budgeted for FY21. Then as you look at the operating revenue and other sources, these, one thing to note, and I think I've shared this with you before, as you look at this is not going to tie to an audited financial statement. This is basically a flow of funds presentation. So it's kind of taking the accrual basis accounting that we use for the financial statements that you just saw and tying it on an annual basis to a cash flow so that you can see the money coming in, money going out. And on an accrual basis, there are things that are treated differently, like debt service, like depreciation. They're non-cash expenditures. So we add those in on the revenue side here and we deduct it on the expense side. It's squirrely, I know, but it's a mechanism that we have to go through to show you that the non-cash expenses negate one another. And so that's some of the adjustments that we make. And so you'll see here that once you get all the ins and outs and some of the actual pieces up here, the contributed capital are the big components. Those are actual cash contributions, obviously, by developers and by outside parties that K-Way jointly finances project with. I think the biggest one under the contributed capital is the Cane Island Intersection City 230 kV line upgrade in a partnership financially with Duke. I think they're going to reimburse 100% of that. That's like 4.1 million of that 5 that you see. So, or the 4.5 rather. So some big projects, and those are actual cash balances that come in. So our total other sources of 32 added to the previous slide gives you total revenues and other sources of 229 million after all the add backs. On the operating expenditures and other use side, this gives the other side of the equation now. We've accounted for all the dollars coming in. We have to have a balanced budget, 229 million on revenues. We have 229 million on expenses. The biggest piece of that, as we shared with you previously, is 117 million for fuel and purchase power. That's about 51% of the total budget is fuel and purchase power. And then departmental O&M is the other big piece. That's 39 million. And that's, for the most part, salaries and wages, our salaries and benefits in that category. And then the other big cash outlay as we go through the expenses and other uses is for capital improvements. And that's the gross number. That's not net of contributions. So that's why you see it there as a total, the bigger number. So that's the cash outlay of 28.4. You add all those together and that gets you to the total expenditures and other uses of $229 million, which ties out to the revenue side. So to recap, and again, you've had the document, and I know you've spent time looking at it. We don't go into a great level of detail in this overview, but something to keep in mind is the VPs are ready. Cindy's going to come next and share with you staff's recommendation for market level adjustment. And the VPs are also ready to present their pieces and are on the call, obviously, to share anything you might have, answer questions for them. But just as a recap, to let you know, we've looked at what we were going to try to achieve. I showed you the general overview. And as a recap, here's what we've done. We've met the board's current fiscal policy for this fiscal year 21 budget. We have no staffing increases for this fiscal year. We have no base rate increases, scheduled commercial paper retirement, no additional debt issuance, and again, no market level adjustment reflected in FY21. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or if none, then Cindy Herrera can come at this point and share her piece.
I don't have a question. I just got a comment. The booklet that you put together was very informative, easy to get through, and I actually read through the whole thing and and looked at it, but it's very informative. So thank you for taking the time to putting that together for us.
Thank you, Director Ortega. It's a labor of love. We're big nerds down there, so we like all that detail, and was glad to hear that somebody else appreciates that. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Are you recommending that we approve this now, or is after her? No?
No, the Director Urbina, that's the recommendation on the market level adjustment that we'll be asking approval to be included in the budget. That you won't adopt the budget until next month, or if something happens or the month after that. But the only thing that the board will need to take action on today is the MLA.
So Cindy now is going to talk about that.
She's
Yes,
walking
I
up to the
am.
podium.
Here I am again.
Okay.
I've made it. So hello. So, all right. I'm going to move this along, our human resources overview presentation here. What you're looking at is our current organizational chart. No changes from the last time that this has been presented to you all. Manpower and position utilization data. Our current authorized full-time equivalent 289 with no increase for fiscal year 21, so no adjustment there. And approval position adjustment of 289, so that's going to be remaining the same. Interesting information and data on this slide here that you're seeing in front of you. It's important to identify since 2005, KUA's had an increase of 47% in electric customers. And since that time, we've only had a 0.3% increase in our manpower and our employees. What this exemplifies is the ability for KUA to do more with less, right? And we can definitely state, because of our technological advances, we've incorporated in the migration of highly skilled employees. This has then encompassed us to allow and provide this exceptional service to our customers by the hands of our hardworking employees. So again, it's really impactful when you see that increase there. In this next slide, Brian, oh, okay, sorry, I thought there was a question.
I do have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any way to select the capital cost associated with improvements to enhance the way we do things, to add to the expense of the employees, to see if we compensate how much we spend on systems to reduce the force? Because what we're saying is like we're really doing miracles, and we're not, because we have spent a lot of money on capital expenses for improvements. And so if we add that, maybe we have a better comparison.
I think it also includes where Toho took their services, we were able to reincorporate a lot of those employees and retrain them and have them in different positions. And the same with our meter reading as we get into AMI. I think we need to kind of pat ourselves on the back for being able to take employees and put them into an extremely meaningful position.
Rather than getting rid of them.
Right, right.
And
But actually compare dollars to dollars correctly.
Yes.
Because that percentage is, I don't think is right.
Well, what I was in my meaning in this slide was not identifying what those the cost of the capital improvement and everything that has been associated since 2005, but just merely to reflect how KUA has been able to, with the increase in electric customers, right? We've grown, but you haven't seen that addition to the employees having to grow with that. And there's been a lot of things that have transpired since 2005. So maybe identifying those milestones, some of those larger, tech, IT, the internet and everything that's come along with over the years, as well as our employees. We take pride in our education, our tuition reimbursement, and employees going and getting additional education and adding value and being promoted within. So there's definitely a lot to add into what I was trying to just merely identify with the growth and not the growth in the employees. But definitely merit in what you're saying. There's definitely been costs associated with that. So, yeah. Maybe not. Moving. Jeff, thank you. So moving into this next slide and the information, and Brian touched on back in April, if you recall, staff, myself asking during that time for budgeting purposes to bring back a recommendation for the market level adjustment at a later time. So there was no proposal back at that point because I needed to then go right, COVID, since that time, COVID-19 has really impacted us all in one way or another. And so what I do annually, what staff does is go and survey, right? What are other agencies projecting, budgeting? What are they looking at increasing when it comes to their adjustments for their employees? And what this year brought was there's been some challenges for them as well in determining what their financials is looking like, their impacts, and what you see in front of you is what was gathered thus far. Again, for budgeting purposes, some of these have not been approved by the board, but gathering what this is looking like. And with that being said, what that averages out is a 1.78. There are undetermined because some of these agencies feel that they need, and they actually have time because we start our budgeting early, right? Our process. They actually have more time. They want to see what the impact is before they do make any determination, and they have that time. We don't. So at this point, looking at, based off of that, recognizing the financial unknowns and being sensitive to our current environment, the recommendation to the board of directors at this time is to approve a market level adjustment of 1.5 for the fiscal year 2021 annual budget, contingent on KUA meeting 2020 budgeted electric sales.
So
Question.
that would be the sales up until October.
Correct.
Okay, so we've got a period of time to see what's happening between now and the end of the year.
Is that the end of the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just got a comment.
Sure.
It appears to be based on what Kevin was saying earlier, that he's projecting that we're gonna meet all our financial needs and meet our budget. I think this is what the recommendation of 1.5, I think is very reasonable, especially if it's contingency on the budget being met. Matter of fact, I think this is like Kevin said earlier, we do on the conservative side. This is definitely a conservative raise for the employees of KUA who deserve everything that we could give them legally. So I would have no problems making a recommendation to follow this recommendation. We'll make a motion to approve this recommendation.
If you made a motion, do I have a second?
Prior. May I?
Yes.
Have we released any of our employees to home without pay during this time?
No, we have not. Fortunately, at this point in time, we have been able, those that can work from home are working from home. We've got a large percentage of our workforce that has to come in. Those folks in the lobby, we've been able to repurpose them to do other things that need to be done. So as of this point, no, we have not had to do that.
So there is no impact of any of our employees at this time because of the circumstances. They haven't lost any income during this time. So everyone is a status quo right now.
Yes.
In their
We've been
salary.
fortunate in the sense that we have not had to furlough anyone. Everybody has been out working and doing their job and actually out in the public, and as our field workers are having to come in and do that, and some of us as well. So yes, that has continued.
Madam Chair, you have a motion on the floor and it needs to get a second if it's going to survive.
Okay, do I have a second?
Not me.
I didn't hear what you said, Ethel.
Not me, I don't agree.
Okay. If the motion dies for lack of a second, what do we do from there, Grant? Somebody propose something else?
Someone can make a different motion. Yes.
And I guess I'd like to address it. I guess I can't second it, but I can address
Actually,
it.
yes, you can.
Yes, you
you
could.
can.
Yes,
Yes,
you
you
can.
can.
Okay,
Board
then,
chair can second the motion.
so we can have a discussion and
Mhm.
I like the idea that it's tied to our sales. This is such a time of uncertainty. I don't know how we project what we can do or can't do, but we've got the heart of this issue between now and October, and we'll know clearly whether we're keeping up with budgeted sales or not. And if we're not, then it doesn't go into effect. If it does, then we can surely feel good about giving our employees 1.5%.
Since I've been on the board, this is the lowest adjustment that I've seen. Has always been around the 3-4%. So if this pandemic didn't happen, I would assume we would have been at the 3 and 4. But based on the reporting that we received from Kevin and his staff, that it appears that we're still going to be able to meet our budget, and the revenues will be there to support definitely a 1.5 increase for the staff. So that's why I made my initial motion.
I don't know if you can see me.
No, I can't.
I don't think that we should depend or connect the increase for this year, I mean 21, based on our sales. I think we should look at what is going on in the community, what's happening financially with our customers, because we're basically forcing for them to pay their bills under terrible circumstances that they are having, because most of the population of Kissimmee lost work, lost pay during all this time, and is still losing, is still not making money. And so if they were putting hardship on them to pay their bill, their utility bill, just so that we can give a raise to our employees that have had their salary throughout this time, I don't think it looks good. And so my position is, it's fine if the majority votes for it. It is fine with me if we base it on the sales and we decide this in October. But I don't agree of doing it this year just because of the actual community feeling, how it's going to be felt outside, that we're making money just to pay our employees rather than, I would rather put something in the Good Neighbor Fund to help rather than distribute it among the employees that have already been paid throughout this time frame.
Yep. So Madam Chair, if I could address Director Urbina's comment, that is certainly something that we could do in terms of funding additional monies towards the Good Neighbor Fund. One of the things that we're looking at is, because of the fact that there isn't any travel to speak of in the rest of this fiscal year, and I believe we have budgeted for next year as well, but in the anticipation that things will hopefully return back to normal. But in the current fiscal year, we don't think we're going to spend all the budget that we had for that travel. And so one of the things that we were going to talk to you about as the board, as this materialized, was potential of taking some of those savings that we would realize from that and putting that towards, helping our customers.
There are, just FYI, I guess, in case you don't know it, there are hundreds of people not paying rent right now because they don't have money to pay their rent. And that is impacting them because they can pay, but it's also impacting a lot of landlords that are also part of our community. So there's a lot of landlords now not taking their rental money to be able to allow the person not to be evicted. And we cannot evict anybody right now. So there is a lot going on out there for people that have actually lost their job and not receiving any pay. And so I feel very close to that, and it hurts me.
And Ethel, that comes into play with whether we're making the sales. If people are tightening their budget and raising their thermostats and not using as much electricity, that's certainly going to affect our sales. So we won't keep up with budgeted sales. So we wouldn't have the 1.5% increase. On the other hand, if things get straightened around and people use the same amount of electricity as usual, we'll have budgeted
So
sale.
the landlords are not getting their money so that people can pay their utility bill, so they can only do one or the other at this time. And that's fact. So anyway,
Well, Grant, I guess we need, is there any more discussion?
That's up to the body, Madam Chair. You can ask for further discussion, or you can, if there is none, you can have the question called and vote on the matter.
Okay, is there any more discussion?
I recommend that we talk about this in October when things are back to normal, hopefully.
You need to have you have a motion on the floor in a second, Madam Chair, and you do need to hold a vote on that motion.
Okay, so then I just do it as a regular vote. All those
Yes.
in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by a like sign. Hearing no negative votes, I assume it passed.
I thought there was, you voted no, right? Yeah, we have a negative vote here in the boardroom.
Okay. I
Director, Vice Chair Urbina voted no.
Okay. So it passes 3-1 then.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to be a pain, but I did not hear Director Hemphill's vote.
What was Ray?
Wait a minute, let me make sure I don't have my mute button on.
You did.
I'm unmuted.
And I heard her a hair.
Okay. Yeah, I said yes.
Okay, so yes to the motion, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it passes 3-1.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
now we move on to departmental budgets.
Oh, Madam Chair, only if there are questions for a
Okay.
specific department.
Okay, any other questions about the budget?
Not from me.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, I guess we go on to M. Hear the attorney.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. Just a few items. First, developments in Washington. As you all know, it's pretty much gridlock there. There's a lot of partisan, a lot of partisan infighting going on. But the House did pass a almost 1,800 page bill that they called the HEROES Act. The relevant provisions of that were that they imposed a moratorium on disconnections for the duration of this pandemic plus 120 days thereafter. And that moratorium did not just apply to residential customers, but to small business customers as well. That's not law. The Senate has to agree with that, and then the president would have to sign that bill into law. But that has passed the House. Some other relevant provisions of that, the HEROES Act, were that they increased the ability of cities to tap into the municipal liquidity facility. Before, it was limited to communities of 500,000 and above. Now, communities of 50,000 and above are allowed to tap into it. So potentially, that might be revenue available to municipal electric utilities for cities that are at least 50,000, and Kissimmee certainly would meet that threshold.
Grant,
Yes, sir.
Could you explain that just a little bit more?
Sure.
I'm not sure what that is. I'm pardon that ignorance.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Director Ortega. In the CARES Act, the Congress passed and the President signed into law a provision that allowed cities, I believe it was cities of 500,000 and more and counties of 1 million residents or more, allowed them to get help from the Federal Reserve Board. So the Federal Reserve Board would make money available, and you could use that money perhaps to issue bonds or what have you to raise needed cash flow to meet operating needs. So we didn't benefit from that, even if we wanted it. And right now, as Kevin's indicated, we don't necessarily need that. But now the House bill, it's not law yet, but this last bill I've been talking about, the HEROES Act, it expanded the accessibility of what they call a municipal liquidity facility, of getting those funds, access to those funds. It expanded that to cities of 50,000 or more. So if for some reason the city, and we believe it does, APPA believes it does apply to municipal electric utilities, electric utilities of communities that qualify could have access to those funds. Hopefully we won't need that, but it would be nice to know if it's there if we do. And so those are the two major provisions of that law, of that act, which is not a law yet. The moratorium, which that's a pretty dramatic imposition from Washington on the ability of utilities throughout the country to collect revenue. But then also the possibility that in return for that moratorium, the utility might be able to access funds to get through the crunch. So that's what came out of Washington. I do have some happy news, which is nice to share during these days. At a board meeting earlier in May, the FMEA Board of Directors welcomed JEA back into the FMEA membership fold at their request. Yeah, that was a great moment for public power in the state of Florida and the country. I can't go into great detail, but so far the Stanton litigation involving the coal plant that OUC runs on our behalf and FMPA's behalf, so far developments there have been positive. We hope that continues. And then finally, I just wanted to share a personal note. The legal office is very proud of Jennifer Gonzalez, my executive assistant and paralegal. She just received her grades from her latest semester in law school. She got straight A's. I never met anyone in law school who had straight A's. I met some people with 3 or 2 A's, but not straight A's. So
You didn't get straight A's?
no, sir, not in law school, not in law school.
Okay.
But with that, I stand for any questions. Otherwise, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is the HEROES Act the one that the president said would be dead on arrival?
Yes.
Okay.
But, something can die, but they can resurrect a part of it, like a limb or,
Oh,
you
God.
know, so we have to keep our eyes on it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions for Grant? Then we'll move on to Brian.
We have the reminders, Jeff. Not very many. I would point out that the next month's board meeting will be the meeting where we interview board candidates for the replacement of our outgoing chair. Just want to bring that to your attention.
And that will be, so we will have in-person meeting.
Yes, we'll
That's what we're planning.
be reaching out to the candidates very soon.
And if I can go ahead and address that now too, I've got paper copies of all of the applications. And do y'all need paper copies so you can look over them a bit in advance, and then the additional parts of the packet with the questions and that kind of stuff? Do you want KUA to get all of that out to you before the meeting, or have you got some of it, or what?
I'd like to have it all in a package if that's possible.
Okay.
We can certainly do that.
It's not gonna hurt to have it. I have it on my system, but having it in one package might help too.
Well, and if you're doing it for most of us, might as well just send everybody a package.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other director comments? Ethel?
No, none, thank you.
Manny?
No, thank you. Great meeting. Hopefully we'll do this in person next month.
Ray?
I don't have any specific comments, but I'd like to thank all the staff and everybody for their support of KUA during this very unusual period of time. And I I'd also like to know if anybody's heard anything from Jeannie. You might have talked about that before the meeting actually started.
I conversed with her via text message. Things are going well, but I'll reach out to you later on today, Ray.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. Good meeting. Glad we got it together to talk about all this, and hopefully see you in person next month.
Okay,
So I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, IT.
okay.
Mug?